36 seconds. That's it. That's all it took for the Hindenburg to go from this majestic symbol of the future to a fiery catastrophe. And the story we all think we know is that this one moment, it just killed the dream of the passenger airship forever. But what if that's not the whole story?
Okay, let's get into it. Because the real reason an entire way of travel just disappeared from the sky is so much more complex, and honestly, way more fascinating than just a single spectacular fire.
I mean, it's a pretty simple question, right? But the answer gets to the very heart of how we design technology, how we think about risk, and how we decide what the future of travel even looks like. And the clues, they aren't just in the ashes of the Hindenburg.
Of course, we have to start with the Hindenburg. We just have to. Its image is seared into our collective memory as the ultimate technological failure. It's the poster child for disaster.
So, May 6, 1937, the dream of floating across the Atlantic lifted by hydrogen comes to this horrifying end. And thanks to newsreels and radio, the whole world saw it happen almost in real time. Public confidence just shattered. It seemed like an open and shut case. But it really wasn't.
Now here's where the story takes a turn. The Hindenburg wasn't the event that started the collapse. No, it was more like the final nail in a coffin that had already been built. And to really understand why, we've got to go back 7 years to a totally different airship and a very different kind of failure.
This right here, this is the core of it. We're talking about two completely different disasters. You have the Hindenburg, and then you have a British airship called the R-101. And together, they exposed two unique and equally fatal flaws in the whole airship idea.
So, let's break this down because it's super important. The Hindenburg disaster was a technical failure. It was a well-designed machine with one single catastrophic vulnerability, that flammable hydrogen. But the R-101? That was an institutional failure. An immature, flawed design that got pushed into service by political pressure long before it was ready. See the difference? One was a problem of physics, the other a problem of politics.
And this timeline, it just tells the whole story, doesn't it? The R-101 crashes in 1930, and boom, Britain's entire program is just terminated. All through that decade, airplanes are getting dramatically faster, more reliable. So by the time the Hindenburg burns in 37, the airship was already losing the race. The fire just made it official.
You know, the story of the R-101 is just a chilling case study. It was supposed to be this grand symbol of the British Empire, but the engineers knew it was dangerously flawed. Political deadlines just steamrolled their warnings, and it crashed on its very first long-distance flight, proving that a bad decision made in a boardroom can be just as lethal as a spark in a gas bag.
But you know, beyond the spectacular disasters, there was a much deeper, more fundamental problem brewing. Airships weren't just proving to be unsafe. They were being completely out-evolved by a competing technology with a totally different philosophy of safety.
And here's where you see that core difference in how they were designed. Airships had what engineers call a holistic structure. Everything depended on everything else. Think of it like a giant soap bubble. One tiny tear and the whole thing can collapse. Airplanes, though, they were modular. They were built with the assumption that things would fail, so you could lose an engine and still keep flying. So think about what that holistic structure really means. It means the airship's safety depended on everything working perfectly, all the time. A single point of failure, a tiny gas leak, a structural flaw could doom the entire vessel. The margin for error was practically zero.
And then you have this idea, graceful degradation. This concept is the entire reason we fly safely in airplanes today. The system is designed to fail well. It actually anticipates problems and has backups for its backups. It's a philosophy of resilience, not perfection, and it's the philosophy that won.
So after these massive disasters, it wasn't just the public that lost faith. The entire system, the regulators, the insurers, the people who actually make the industry run, they all came to a very cold, very hard conclusion. It was like a domino effect, a chain reaction that just wiped out the business case. First, the crashes prove the risk is way too high. Then, the insurance market does the logical thing. They refuse to underwrite the vehicles or they make the cost insane. And without insurance, you can't operate. At the same time, regulators bring in new safety standards that airplanes could meet, but airships, they just couldn't. The whole thing just became impossible.
And this is the point that's so crucial to get. This wasn't just about scared passengers or dramatic headlines. This was a rational, economic decision made by actuaries and engineers. The numbers just didn't work anymore. The risk was too high, the safety couldn't be guaranteed, and the airplane was simply a better bet.
But the story doesn't just end there. The Airship didn't completely vanish. Instead, the hard lessons from its failures forced it to evolve into something very, very different.
Today's airships have learned every single lesson from the past. They use safe, inert helium, not flammable hydrogen. They don't rely only on buoyancy, they use hybrid lift with aerodynamics and thrust. And most importantly, they've totally abandoned the dream of mass passenger travel. Instead, they focus on niche roles like heavy cargo, surveillance, or research. Jobs where speed isn't the #1 priority and the human risk is kept to a minimum.
So in the end, that's really the big takeaway. The passenger airship didn't just die. It was a technology that was forced to discover its own boundaries. Its failure wasn't an end, but a clarification of what lighter-than-air flight is actually good for.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating question for today. The Airship failed because it lacked that graceful degradation. It couldn't fail safely. So as we design the next generation of autonomous vehicles, from cargo drones to flying taxis, how do we make absolutely sure we're learning the right lessons from the ghosts of the Hindenburg and the R101?